So we should be live. Indeed, we are.
Yes.
Welcome, everybody. We're just waiting for our third guest. Hopefully, he'll be joining us anytime soon. But here we are for another Brown Car Guy therapy session. I hope you are joining us today. And we've already got Naveed of Naveed4Speed joining me. And Naveed, why don't you take a few minutes to introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first things first, thank you for having me on this podcast. I need a therapy session. I think we all
Don't
do
we
every
all?
now and then. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's come at a good time. So I'm Naveed. I am a motoring journalist, car reviewer, influencer, whatever you want to call it, a bit of everything. My background, I studied engineering at university, and now I review cars, I review products that are relating to cars, I create videos for YouTube, and I also write for a website called Auto Evolution. So my life just revolves around cars and everything to do with cars.
So how did you get into this? How did you end up doing what you're doing, which is your full-time job, right?
Yes, yeah, pretty much full-time job and then some. You know,
Yeah.
as you know, in this industry, especially with content creation, it never stops.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is my life basically. But yeah, I was studying engineering at university, and then
All right.
during and then COVID hit. And we started
Right.
having lockdowns in 2020, and it sort of allowed me to think about which direction I want to take my career. Do I want to follow my interests and stuff like this? So I started to get in touch with people in the industry. I started to create some content, and it just sort of grew from there. And it's now photography, videography, writing, a few different forms of media, and it's just grown to where it is today, where I am fortunate to drive some really nice cars and also drive some cars that I think a lot of my viewers would be interested in. And yeah, just have a good time whilst I do it.
And what got you into cars in the first place? It's an interesting question. People ask me this a lot, and I find it quite weird because, with a lot of people, when you say what got you into cars, and they say, well, my dad was into cars, or my uncle was into cars, or we used to go see the races, or whatever. And I'm like, there's nobody in my entire spectrum of familial and friendship circle that was ever into cars in any sense whatsoever. And so where it came from, I absolutely have no idea. But as far back as I can remember, being a kid at primary school during the playground breaks, everybody would be kicking around a football and I'd have my nose pressed up against the fence looking at the cars on the road outside. So, like, as far back as I can remember, I was always obsessed with them. Where it came from, I don't know. How about you?
Interestingly enough, I can relate to you in some regards because with anybody that I know growing up, we were into cars. There was no interest in cars. I was one of the children who was kicking around a football in primary
Yeah.
school, for example. So I was into sports. I was never into
Yeah.
cars. And actually, my interest started when my brother's older than me by 5 years, and he used to watch
Right.
Top Gear. And every week I used to say, "Oh, you put that show on again." And then a few
Hmm.
times I'd sit and I'd actually watch it, and I started to get more and more interested in it. And that's where I think my interest with cars grew. And then, of course, I live in Bradford, a city
Yeah.
that is has car culture in its heart,
Yeah.
for better or for worse. But there's a huge interest in cars here, and that sort of spurred my interest as well, and it sort of made me want to pursue this career, basically.
Tell me about the Bradford car culture. Bradford. I have a couple of friends in Bradford, and I was speaking to one of them recently, and he said, "Shazad, why haven't you come to Bradford yet? You've got to come to Bradistan." And funny because I've been like several places, but I've never actually been to Bradford. But even he was like, "There's a car culture here. You need to come and check it out."
Oh, you know what? You are going to love it. There's a car culture and there's a food culture here. If you
Uh-huh.
want food, this is the place to come because that's how we entertain in Bradford. You come over and we say let's go out to eat, for example. But yeah, there's a huge car culture here. And a very interesting story. This was last year. I had a caterum on loan, and I'd just gone to film it. And I was driving back home, and I was driving through Bradford city centre, and of course it's a Caterham. It's going to get attention. It's going to get looks, and people are gonna, thumbs up, and they're going to appreciate it. And I found myself driving through city centre, and right at that moment, a LaFerrari went past me, and I thought, okay, he stole the spotlight there, you know.
Yeah.
But that's what you can find in Bradford. You can find, supercars here. You can find classic cars here. You can find all sorts of cars here. There's something for everybody if you know where to look.
Yeah, a LaFerrari driving around Bradford. That's not something you'd expect, really, is it?
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, I've been to many car shows, and I've seen some incredible cars, but then you see some really nice cars here on the streets, and I imagine it's somewhat like London, right? I mean, you've got so many people living there with so many different backgrounds and cultures, and it all mixes together, and then you've got a big car scene there as well, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. But the thing is, like, I mean, you don't really would see a LaFerrari. I mean, you might if you like hanging around, with all of the car chasers, the paparazzi who hang out in Kensington and Knightsbridge, and that's sort of the places where you might see those sort of cars. But invariably, those are cars that have been shipped over by, Middle East tourists,
Yeah.
So it's that sort of market. But then, yeah, but certainly surprisingly, I'm seeing more and more classic cars in the London area. And part of me likes to believe that maybe that's got something to do with the emissions regulations because,
Yes.
if your car is older than 40 years, you don't have to worry about ULEZ and what have you. But I'm definitely seeing more, even like ordinary stuff like, Minis and Morris Minors and Beetles and stuff like that.
Well, I was going to mention about the ULEZ because you did a lot of reporting on
Yeah.
ULEZ and when it was all kicking off. So this is where I want to lead on to journalism as a whole because I kind of alluded to myself being a motoring journalist, but I wouldn't explicitly say I review cars. But that sort of investigative journalist, that reporting on what's going on, that's what I saw from yourself,
Yeah.
and it leads me on to that whole imposter syndrome because
Yeah.
you come into this industry and you sometimes you feel like, well, should I be here?
Yeah.
What has got me here? Why am I here? There are people here that are so much more qualified than me or so much more experienced than me, and they're doing what I would think of as the real work, and it kind
Just
of
hold that thought for a second. Hold that thought for a second whilst I welcome Mr.
Hello.
here
Late,
we go.
Mr. Late Latif, as we say in our culture. You
Yeah,
Badmash, where have you been, Imthishan?
I was having a meeting with a man about coffee. How are you, gentlemen?
Oh, buy coffee. I
Very
could
well,
do with
thank
some
Yeah.
of that.
you.
So, Imtishan, just before we introduce you to the audience, just introduce you to each other. So, Imtishan meet Naveed, Naveed meet Imtishan. Naveed is an up-and-coming, promising young car reviewer here in the UK. He has his own channel, Naveed4Speed, and he also freelances. And grizzly old Imtishan is my partner in crime from Dubai. We
Good
worked on
old
the Middle
days.
East edition. We worked on the Middle East edition of Car Magazine. We co-founded Motoring Middle East, and I escaped, and he got left behind. So does that about sum you up, Imtishan?
Pretty much, pretty much,
How's
pretty
it
much.
going, buddy?
Not bad, not bad. Another interesting day in paradise, as I like to say. In the heart of car culture in the Middle East, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So just very briefly, just tell everybody if there's anything I missed out, who you are, in case anybody doesn't know you by now.
Oh, I don't know. Ex-car Middle East like you. Did quite a bit in the tech space before this. I was an IT journalist for a very long time, which is why I'm not doing that ever again. And now I am essentially, I would say, consultant slash business journalist. I write for Arabian Gulf Business Insight about the business of automotive these days, and not so much the reviewing.
Yeah,
So I continued motoring Middle East for a short while after you left, but I saw the space
yeah.
changing, transforming, and I decided to transform myself into something else entirely. And here we are. I think that
You
pretty much
know,
up to speed.
yeah. So you know what? It was just before you joined, we were just having a very interesting conversation, and actually, what you've said there segues into it quite nicely. Because let me just preface that. by just responding to Naveed in a sense, because he was talking about the fact that when I was in 2023, I was covering the ULEZ situation, the ULEZ expansion, and I did it from a journalistic point of view. Now, both myself and Imthishan, we are essentially trained journalists. So even before, although I started my career as Saudi Arabia's first motoring journalist, but I did spend a 5-6 year segment working at a local newspaper here in the UK when I came back the first time in the 90s, in which I covered everything from local politics to events, to marches, to every kind of stuff. So, and that gave me a very important and I feel a valuable grounding in what journalism was, what actual journalism was, and what the whole process of producing content. And it was a newspaper, so publishing content, everything from pictures, texts, interviews, and at that time it was all on the phone and everything like that, to getting copy down, to getting copy laid out, to getting copy to the printer, all of that sort of stuff. And so Naveed was touching a little bit about on the sense of imposter syndrome. So I'd invite Naveed to carry on a little bit, tell us a little bit more about how, what he meant by that and how he feels about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was trying to get into the industry. I was trying to create contacts. I was trying to network and create whatever content I could. And then you have these seasoned journalists who are there reviewing cars with, professional photographers, and they are publishing in some of the best magazines. And this kind of reminds me of when I first met you, Shazad. Do you remember when I first met you?
Remind me, I have a terrible memory, as
You you
Imthishan
you,
will
you might not
testify.
remember because it was just in passing. But
Uh-huh.
we were at a McLaren event.
All right. Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah,
We
yeah.
were at the
This was at
McLaren
Millbrook, was it?
at Millbrook, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
We were driving the 720S and the McLaren
Yeah.
GT. And I remember I just got out of the 720S and you were about to get into one of the cars. And me being, just a content creator, I was literally just starting out at the time. I was making videos on my phone. I was making a video in front of a McLaren 720S, and I remember you were about to come by, and I stopped, and you very kindly were telling me, no, carry on, do what you need to do first. And I thought to
Yeah.
myself, well, maybe my stuff isn't as important. These are important journalists who are wanting to do work, but he still gave me the time. So I find that sort of that kindness, that sense of community throughout the whole of the automotive industry. And I'm sure it's the same in the Middle East and what you guys experienced and what you guys did as well.
No,
It was. It
no,
was.
no.
Go on, I'll hand this to you, Imthishan.
First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you, Naveed. I think it's really hard to explain what it was like because I was like you. I think I was also somebody who thought I had to train as a journalist first and foremost. I had to get in there and had to learn the tricks of the trade, which I did. I learned the basics, and I think that's what made the difference compared to today's people, that I have a sense of ethics and quality and understanding of what's important. But a lot of people these days don't have that, but I digress. I think when I wanted to break into cars, that's always why I did this. I was very clear that I only wanted to write about cars. And I'll tell you something, it's very difficult to do that. Every door shuts in your face. I think that's part of the way with getting into anything you like. But I didn't realize how long it would take. I was there 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, I thought, this is just not happening. And if not for Shazad, I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have embarked on this journey. Because so much of it was people saying no. No, and there's not like a path of, okay, after this, you do this and we'll give you a shot. No, it's just like, no, try somebody else, try somebody else. Well, I tried everybody.
Yeah.
So who was I left to try with? And I want to be a journalist. I think now the barrier to entry is pick up your camera and go out there. The problem, what's lacking from the space is nobody tells you that you need to have a voice, you need to have an idea in your head, you need to have the things that why somebody would listen to you in the first place.
Yeah.
I had that all ready to go. So by the time I came up to meet Shazad, if you remember our first meeting, I had it all planned out. I had everything. And that's why I was able to, I think, hopefully succeed in that meeting and convince him. But not to make it too controversial right off the bat, but I think if somebody else had been in that interview, they wouldn't have said yes. Because the barrier for entry for brown people is invisible and so much higher than anybody else. You can't just be Chris Harris, who somebody succeeds on not being brown despite being that's what he is. You've got to be somebody who is the Einstein, the Idris Elba, the Tom Cruise of automotive journalism. You've just got to be the best. You've got to be so far above the Barack Obama of automotive journalism. Everybody, nobody can deny you a shot. And that person doesn't exist because when you're young, you don't have. I think we just lost the brown car guy.
Yes.
Was it something I said?
No, no, no. It's I think he's trying something, but we can continue.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my story. I think it takes a while to get in, and I think what I learned from that experience is it's really important to give people the time of day when you meet them.
Yes.
A lot of people who I think who read me and watch my videos and our videos was inspired, and I always have the time for that person.
Okay.
You know, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know who they and I don't want anything from them, but I think it's really important to inspire people. Because
Yeah.
if you don't, I would never want to be in the opposite side of that position, putting somebody down like me who's just starting out. I'd never want to say like, don't do this. Even though I would say now, don't do this because it's not a great career path. But if it's your passion, you don't have a choice, honestly speaking.
Yeah.
You know, before we came online, and yeah, sorry about that. I'm just testing some new equipment, so I think maybe I won't do this again. But anyway, so it may happen again. But anyway, before we came online, there was something Naveed was saying, which I thought was very, I think, relevant to the conversation that we're having. And he was talking about he went to a press event recently, and he was seeing a lot of new faces. And you talked about the barrier to entry into this game. And like you say, Imthishan, it's like we always felt that we needed to be journalists first, you know, to be able to understand the art of, because I always call it the art of communication. For me, it's all about communication. If you can't communicate, you know, what you're experiencing or what you're learning or what you're finding out to an audience, then what the hell are you doing? You know, then you're just in it for a laugh, you know, then you're just in it for yourself. And then that's not what it's about. So for us, we always felt that, well, you come at it from a journalistic point of view. But I think that what's happened now is that transition that's happened recently with the, for want of a better way of saying it, and the influencer set. I think it's turned more into a look, I'm here and I'm doing this, rather than trying to bring you some pertinent insight and information. And whether that's to the detriment or to the benefit of the industry as a whole, I'm not quite sure. I do, and I have said this before, I do believe that the car industry itself prefers it that way because they believe they can control the messaging that way. And in that sense, personally, I feel that that means the audience is losing out because it's losing out on the journalistic, credibility, gravitas, insight, but the responsibility to do due diligence and to actually do the work in order to get it out to people. And I think that's what we're kind of losing. Over to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I do think that it's a lot easier to you know, the barrier of entry is a lot easier, but you know, I'm not here to talk negative about anybody because I come from that. I started
Yeah,
off
yeah.
as an influencer, and I would probably still say I am an influencer. It's just that I do, you know, writing and I do, you know, a lot of other stuff on the side of that. But at heart, I'm still an influencer, and if it wasn't for this, you know, this industry the way that it is now, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I fully understand where people are coming from, but I also need to look at, you're talking about due diligence. That's, I think, one of the most important things. And it was I think it's Steve Cropley once said that you need to put your audience first. You are a conduit for your audience. So whatever you are doing, you need to serve the audience, not the, you know, the car brand or whatever you are reviewing. So I think that's what we need to look at first and foremost. And I think this also brings us nicely onto that book that you have right behind you. Yeah.
How to be an automotive content creator. Yeah, that's a summation of 35 years of doing what I'm doing, and also the transition that we've seen. And the thing that you just said about the Steve Cropley quote about, you know, understanding where your audience is, and Imthishan, I'll start this off and then I'll let you continue it. But once we left Car Middle East magazine print, we decided to do, me and Imthishan, we decided to do something because we knew we had an audience. The reason we decided to do something was not because necessarily we wanted to do it, was because we had an audience that literally demanded us to do it. But then we sat down and we thought, well, where is this audience? is this audience, because already the market in the Middle East is kind of 10, 15 years younger than here. They were already transitioning to a digital space. And so we decided to go web. We decided to go internet. And I think, Imthishan, you'll agree, I think that we were constantly moving our media output to where we believe the audience was.
Yeah, which is a bit of a problem in some ways. I'm going to break with tradition and I say I think there is a little bit of an ego attached to it still, because we kind of felt like we had something to say and we wanted our faces to be the ones saying it, let's be honest, before somebody else said it. Now it's really impossible because the
Yeah.
speed of content creation, the speed of opinion generation, whether some of it is AI powered or just so many brains in the same space, is that you can't be first. There's no way. There's too many people producing too much content. So it's all about differentiation now. It's not about actually the message. Like, for example, say Audi is doing a new interior, right? Just take as an example for their cars. Nowadays, it used to be, okay, we got to be the first people to say it's the first one in maybe in the Middle East, first ones in the UK or whatever. Now it's like, well, Audi's put a new interior, but I hate it. Watch me for 10 reasons why I hate it. Or this Audi is never, it's all about, again, feeding the algorithm as opposed to actually saying what you really feel. And saying what you really feel is hard because you need time to think about what you feel. I just want to go back to the earlier point a little bit. And I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this, but I think it is important to have people coming up. There needs to be a conveyor belt of people coming into the space, any space, whether you work at a McDonald's, you work in selling Nike shoes, or you are a car writer. But the problem is, I think the industry became incredibly insular. I think it became very gatekeepy, if that's a word. I think it became about keeping people out and protecting what was and used to be an incredibly lush job where not much was asked of you, but you got unbelievable benefits, not financial benefits, but benefits in terms of lifestyle. As that ebbed away, people worked harder to keep the influences out. So I can see why there's a lot of resentments towards influencers, some of it wrong. But at the same time, the journalists as a larger group were not changing the world, but there was a smaller group like the world who were actually producing really incredible memorable stuff. But I think Shazad and me both know that the vast majority of people in the space didn't need to read a book about how to be an automotive journalist. They just did it because, it was fancy cars, nice hotels, great benefits, and for a very small group of people, you were the kings. The vast majority of them were not changing the world, and nothing they did will be remembered. Sorry to sound tough, but it is what it is. I think I came in there with that sense that I didn't want to upset that apple cart. I came in there in the sense that I purely just wanted people like me to be heard, because that was what was not heard. And again, Shazad took me in and gave me that shot, but I just don't think there was that kind of people listening to us. The kind of cars that we talked about. I don't know what it's like on your side of the fence, Naveed, but I just don't think people were hearing us.
Well, before you respond, Naveed, I think one thing that's very important is, and something I do talk about in the book, is the fact that what digital enabled. So when I started out, in the old days, back in 1989,
Pre-war.
pre-war in Saudi Arabia. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to write. I loved writing. Actually, that was my first love, was writing. I wanted to write. I loved writing and I loved cars. And I thought I want to combine these two and I want to be a motoring journalist. And I did it in a space where there was no motoring journalism. But the fact was that at that point in time, you were not able to reach an audience in any way whatsoever unless you were published in a newspaper or a magazine or something like that. That was the only way you were ever going to reach an audience. There was no other way you would be able to reach it. Okay, you could go like the small press route. You could do stuff like that. But that's a very tiny segmented market. Now, the difference between that time and now is that anybody with one of these can reach an audience. And that audience could be your friends or your family, or it could be millions. You just don't know. It depends on your content, and it depends partly on luck as well. But anybody can do that. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, like I said, it's the democratization of media. And it means that everybody then has a voice and everybody can talk about, what they think and believe and get their point of view across. But it's a bad thing because then you get a lot of you get a lot of rubbish with the good stuff, and that's the trouble. And then you have to, then it becomes down to a discerning audience to try and sort between the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I think that ultimately quality will still shine through. So hard work, dedication, an effort that you put into your content, I think that will still always shine through and get audiences. But sometimes I do feel a bit despondent that I'm a bit wrong on that. So I don't know. I mean, it's up to you guys to correct me. But because as Imthishan knows, I've always been about trying to get the right content to the right people, in the right way. But sometimes I see people, like you say, going, oh, 10 things I like about this, or 5 things I hate about this, or look at me, guys, I'm here, or I'm about to throw this car off a cliff. Look at this. And I'm going, oh, really? Is that what it takes now? And if that's what it takes, I'm like, well, I'm done. I mean, it's like, it's that sort of thing. But I'd like to hear what the younger panelists believes on this.
Well, I do think, like you say, yes, it is a good thing and it is a bad thing. It's good because it means that we get the sort of competitiveness, the quality is higher overall. In order to set yourself apart, you need to produce quality content, not quick content. You need to, people are going to wait for your content necessarily if it's better. It's not good because it means that there's so much content out there that some of it, like you say, is rubbish. When I was at university, they told us that people used to come to the library, they used to try and look for a book. If they couldn't find that book, they would have to get that book ordered in, and it was difficult to find information. Now, since everything's gone more digital and the internet is, everywhere, there's too much information. So the issue you have is having to sift through all that information to find what's relevant and what's important for you. And I think that's the same thing here in terms of the content. And then you talk about, this whole, 10 things that I like about a car, or, what people are going to do. How we search things has changed as well, and how we find things has changed as well. And with all the noise, you have to try and, put your content first. That's why you get stuff like that. And I think it's important that we continue to have good quality content that is, found and accessible and easy to read, easy to follow. This sort of content, I've been told that I should try this, trendy content for, jump on the trends and there's a new sound, so use this in your content and stuff like this. It's gonna mean that your content is gonna go viral. Yes, content with that sound or content following that trend does go viral, but for every 1 or 2 videos that you see following that trend, there's 1,000 videos that have failed, right? And then it's all about your brand. You talk about an audience. I look at it from a more digital perspective. It's the brand that you create. As soon as the call started, you said Naveed4Speed. That's how I'm recognized. And it's the brand that I've created. But the brand that I've created isn't a brand that follows trends. It's a brand that tries to report on what I feel when I'm driving a car, or what is important to the audience. And how the audience views your content has changed as well, because like we were talking before the call, it's more about what spec can I get this car in and what features can I get in there, which you can just find on a spec sheet or on the manufacturer's website. But they would just like that in a different form of media through a video, and that's totally okay. That's how people understand and take their media, how they absorb their media. But it just means that there is a risk that the quality of content can go down in general. So you just have to try and compete to find your way to the top.
Imthishan, in this era of ChatGPT and Google AI, when, like you said, like Naveed says, the people are looking for spec. I mean, nowadays, you do that Google search, it won't even take you to a website or anymore. It'll just give you the spec that you want. I mean, are brands and are people conveying this information even relevant and important anymore?
I don't think opinions are relevant anymore. What's important are what the AI considers a fact. People are looking for facts to support it. Your opinions are coming from your podcasts, from stuff like this. I used to say articles, but I'm not sure where opinions are being generated. Your cable TV news and so on. But you're not looking for, if you're researching for a car, is the new MG5 good? No. You just go, tell me about the MG5. What does it have? Does it have X feature, B feature, Y feature, etc., and so on? But you're not actually asking, is it good or bad? because I think when you put yourself in the shoes of a person looking to buy that car, you just want to know if the car has the stuff you want and if it was at a price you can afford, because you've already decided, you know. And I think that's quite dangerous because that means you walk into the showroom with your mind made up. And I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a showroom and the salesperson has successfully convinced me not to buy it, not through any good efforts of their own. I have a good example of the Supra from, I think, last year when I was all set to buy a Supra. And the person on the counter basically asked me if I was buying it for my son, which is great, which is great because I am not married. I do not have a
Yeah.
son. And if I was buying a Supra for my son, that blighter would have to work bloody hard to earn a 200,000 Supra for his 21st birthday or whatever, because clearly I look like I'm in my 60s.
Uh,
But that's an example of that sort of thing doesn't happen if you go in with your mind made up. Because if you go with your mind made up, you're like, okay, I'm going to buy the car. This kind of incident. And that sort of thing should put you off. It should. Because if they treat you like that at the point of sale, what are they going to treat you like at the point of after sales when you need to have warranty? And it's not like the UK when we have multiple places to go if you don't like that deal. And Dubai is just one person to go to. So it's very important to get that interaction right. I think Shazad, we did some work on this years ago,
we did,
and we
yeah,
found that
yeah,
it's really bad.
yeah,
They're really
yeah.
bad at this.
They're bad here as well, to be honest. I've heard some horror stories. I'm sure you have in Naveed. Naveed in Bradford, I'm sure it's a smaller market there. Although you said there's a big car culture in Bradford.
Yeah, I mean it's not a small city, but it's not a large
Right.
city either. You get, all sorts of car brands here. You've got main dealers here. You've got, there's loads of cars. I mean, talking about these new Chinese cars,
Yeah.
we've got all sorts of those cars. I've seen even today as I went out and I saw a few JQs on the road,
Yeah.
BYDs everywhere. We're seeing these brands here, so we do have that culture of, yes, we like the sporty cars, the enthusiast cars and stuff like this, but also it's a large enough market that even the most obscure brands are trickling down to here.
Let's jump into the Chinese question actually, and I know that Imthishan has been studying the market as well in the Middle East, which has changed dramatically since I was there last what six and a half years ago. The influx of the Chinese brands are, and I've done some content on this myself. Are legacy manufacturers basically screwed? What do you guys think?
Naveed, you go first.
This is a very interesting question because it kind of I mean, this is before my time, but from what I've read and what I've heard, it kind of reflects the sort of time when Japanese cars started coming into the UK. And they're still here. We still have them. At times they've been struggling, but we still do have them. So maybe is it something that we have to accept that we are just going to live with it? But it also sort of reminds me of something which I experienced, which was I remember reviewing some cars which people would look at and say, oh, that's ugly car. I don't like that. That's who would buy that car? And then I saw people driving them on the road, and I thought, well, you see, the interesting thing is the market, I feel like, is dictated, amongst other things, by price. If you offer the right product with the right features for the right price, people will buy it. They don't care about legacy, they don't care about heritage, they care about what they get for the money. And these Chinese brands, which are more refined than they were now, they are coming over and they are offering, the same thing that, a European brand would offer for, 10, 15,000 pounds more. And it does kind of feel like right now, financially, for the people who are out in the market, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Then if you look at, warranties and after sales and, dealer network and support like that, where that will be in the next few years, I'm not sure, but at the current rate, they are growing. And
They're growing very fast.
yeah, and I
And
think
they've done
we
it in a
just
very short time as well. I mean, Imthishan will remember because we used to do a lot of work at the Dubai motor shows. And I don't, if you remember Imthishan, one time the Chinese brought a limousine. They brought a limousine to one of these events. And we both looked, we opened the door and we thought, this is a piece of shit. This is junk, you know? And
It was
that must
incredible.
have
It was
been,
just, the stretch limo with a 2-liter engine and a manual
That's it.
gearbox, because
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what you want in a limousine, is a clunky manual jerking the champagne as you try
Yeah.
to go and cruise through the suburbs on the way to
It
the
was
prom or
awful.
whatever.
But the thing is to see from how quickly they've gone from that to cars now, which are, exemplary, honestly. Like, you can't really fault them, honestly. When you get in them, you drive them, you go, well, I can't really find anything wrong with this thing.
Oh, don't worry,
I
I
don't,
can.
I don't
I can.
necessarily fall in love with it, but I can't find anything wrong with it. But the rate of progression has been extraordinary, hasn't it? And also in Dubai, I think it's extraordinary. Last time I was there, the number of Chinese brands I saw there was extraordinary.
It's the rate of duplication. That's the thing. I completely agree with everything you're saying, Naveed. I think the people are getting cars they can afford with the features they want. Thing is, though, we have shifted from a conversation about brands and quality and style to some extent to a completely conversation about features. And I don't shop for phones. I just buy the same phone over and over again because it's an iPhone and it works. And I'm in that
Yeah.
digital ecosystem. But I definitely don't think about features because when my phone wears, I'll just get another one. I stick to the same brand. I like simple. I come from a culture of non-waste, and I come from a culture of you can afford to buy a good thing once or a cheap thing many, many times. Which
Yeah.
do you choose? So, for example, when I was I lived in the States for a couple of years and got very cold. And I wish I had bought a jacket in America because my parents insisted on buying me a cheap jacket in Karama, for those of you who live in Dubai. And it was a fake Tommy Hilfiger jacket, and that bloody jacket had to keep me alive through 2 winters. And I walked into the coldest Montanan winter in I think 40 years. It was minus 50. It was so bad that I couldn't
Ooh.
actually, like, I didn't need a fridge. I could just leave my Mountain Dew on the windowsill. It would stay ice cold. And the room didn't have a heater. And because I'm not used to asking for anything, I'm like, oh, I guess we just survive in the frozen waste. But I had this jacket and it was really tough to survive that way. And if I had just gone to a shop, any shop, and spent $300 on a Carhartt jacket designed for that condition, wasn't sexy, wasn't stylish, but I would have been perfectly fine. I would have also looked more American than anything humanly possible. That's what I mean about these Chinese cars. It's all about duplication and getting to the point where looks good, feels good, doesn't break down on the drive, but you bought a car on intangibles. And that's where the motoring press could really sell you on the intangibles. And I hate to use the word educate, but I think it is a little bit of education. Because I come from a Japanese car world, right? That's where I started off with. And it wasn't until I really started pushing into car Middle East that I understand why European car brands have that following. As he knows, I really dislike Porsches, and now I kind of like them annoyingly because I can see why they are what they
There's a
are.
there's a there's a particular yellow 911 that I know of that you will not let anybody else drive. Honestly, you once you got hold of that thing, that's it. You were totally in love with that car.
Well, I think to be honest with you, it won't let anybody else drive itself. That
Yeah, to
car,
be fair, I had
that
to go
car
in
is
it, and I was
absolutely
like, no, you
demonic.
drive it.
No, that car is very much like, yeah, it chooses the owner, much like Christine, right? And it did
Yeah.
something very strange to Shazad. Did something very, very. Can
Yeah.
you explain what happened to you?
Well, it was literally what was it? A Jekyll and Hyde moment. There was literally a
Yeah.
Jekyll and Hyde moment. So I got into that car and I turned into a monster. I was like breaking speed limits, flashing people on the road. I don't flash. I
Flashing
don't flash
people.
people
You
on the
never
road.
flash.
I was flashing people out of the way. It is a demonic car. But
He was shouting at the gearbox.
I was shouting. I was every time I changed gear, I was cursing and I don't even curse. I was
Yeah.
cursing and blinding and shouting. But anyway, but these are the cars that turn us on and get us excited.
But
And this
that's
is
the
the thing. Now,
cars. Yeah.
one thing that I will say, because you're talking about duplication, and one thing that took me by surprise. I was at a BYD conference, and maybe you were there as well, Naveed. I can't remember, but they were talking about what they're doing and they're investing and all the rest of it. And they talked about the fact that they employed 100,000 people. And you thought, okay, maybe that's a factory, maybe that's a plant, maybe that's whatever. No, they employed 100,000 people just in the R&D. So that was 100,000 people just employed to think of ideas, to innovate, to refine, to improve. That's 100,000. And when you think of it, and I looked at it, I said, well, let me see what Volkswagen does, or let me see what the other companies do. And the figures were around 20,000, 25,000. And you go, when you're talking about that sort of level of numbers, you're like, yeah, they're all screwed. Because the amount of innovation and technology and the vast leaps. I just saw somewhere, this is non-automotive related, but I just saw somewhere on my feed, somebody in China has come up with a material that can survive 1,200 degrees centigrade. You know, and it's a material. It's just an ordinary material, and you just go, wow, the level of innovation. And also, they don't have any hang-ups. So they don't have any like, oh, you can't do it. And they're like, no, let's just do it this way, or let's just do it that way. So they're pushing ahead in ways that I don't think the legacy car manufacturers are even able to comprehend, never mind execute. I'm just going to throw this across, but before I do that, I've got a question here from Hooked. And he's asking about what's the best equipment that you use for filming. I'll give you my opinion, and then I think maybe Naveed can answer this as well before we get into the R&D bit. I'm predominantly using the camera I'm using at the moment now, which is a DJI Pocket 3. I think these are brilliant. I think anything by DJI right now is great. I also use GoPros for my car reviews, but I'm actually quite fed up with the GoPros, and if I have budget, I would actually move across to the DJI Action. Naveed, what's the equipment that you use?
Similar for me, it's the DJI Action. I've got a DJI Action 4 at the moment, and I've got a DJI Pocket 2, but I don't use that as much. Again, budget dictates that I don't move over to a DJI Pocket 3 at the moment because it does cost a fair bit more, but it's a pretty impressive thing. And then occasionally I've got a DJI drone. So for me, predominantly it's DJI. I use the action camera on a handle as well because it's got stabilization. And then I can also use it for the car reviews.
Yeah, perfect. So BYD, 100,000 people in R&D. I mean, do you think that the other companies have got a chance when the Chinese are pushing that much just into research, development, and technology and innovation?
I think the Chinese companies, they also listen to their customers as well. And they're able to turn things around a lot quicker. The first BYD cars that came to the UK had Build Your Dreams written on the back. Customers expressed that we think that's a bit cheesy. And then the subsequent cars after that didn't have Build Your Dreams written on the back. And if you compare that to some of the European brands, where they're putting certain powertrains in the car and the customers are saying we don't want that, or they're designing their cars in a particular way and the customers are just not buying them. They need to look at what their audience is after, and I think the Chinese do that really well.
Imthishan, do you think that manufacturers are stuck between a rock and a hard place? Because on the one hand, manufacturers have always intuitively known what their customers want. But right now, they've also got to abide by what the government wants, what legislators want, what authorities want, what emissions regulations want, what crash regulations want. So they're kind of stuck, aren't they? They don't have a lot of room for maneuver.
So the duplication that I was talking about goes both ways. So now traditional car companies are having to kind of copy the Chinese speed of development. And that comes with its own problems because the expectation you have is very different for a traditional manufacturer versus a Chinese manufacturer. And I don't really understand this. I'm mystified that people give a lot of rope to Chinese car companies because they're like, oh, but they're new. I'm like, but these are not like, Johnny Sam and Mama Sung in their house, sitting and going, okay, we'll just make a phone or we'll just make a startup car. These are rich bloody companies from China, right? These are not beginners. They are industrial companies. They're huge companies. You need to treat them in the same level of sort of discerning that you would do for anybody else. I'll give you an example. Ford makes a product that you have in the UK called the Ranger Raptor. Okay, the Ranger Raptor is a great mid-sized pickup. It did really well in Dubai as well. I think we have a slightly more powerful version than the one you get because I think you have a detuned or diesel. I'm not sure.
But we get the diesel. You get the petrol. Yeah.
Yeah, we get the petrol. It's a really good car, and a lot of people start buying it because it was at a price so that an off-road car could be used. Like the really expensive Raptors are really expensive now. They're like 400,000-500,000 dirhams. So Ranger is still around 260, 270, which is expensive. But for somebody coming or upgrading from, say, an FJ Cruiser, they could easily get into a Ranger Raptor. What's the problem? You say, oh, sorry.
The problem is there's somebody at the door.
All right, they can wait. The reality is that when you do that, buy that car, well, they developed that car during COVID. And Ford has a very, very good development cycle, development engineers in the Middle East, a lot of things to make those products really good. But they're having problems because they develop them quickly because they're trying to match that Chinese field development. So the old range Raptors that came out in 2010, you know, the ones that were like
Oh, we've lost Imthishan for a moment there. Maybe it's just the person at the door who's pulled the plug.
Oh,
Oh
I'm
no, he's
still here.
back.
I'm still
He's
here.
back. He's back. He's still here.
Person goes pull the plug.
still there.
I'm gonna be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah,
I'm in
just
my
go and find
office.
out who's at the door. So, just to clarify for
Yeah.
people that might be watching and wondering, 200,000 dirhams is about 40,000 pounds. So when he was talking about the Ranger upper, what did you say, 500,000? So we're talking about 80, 90,000 pounds for a Ranger, which a proper Ranger, full-on, full-fat Ranger, and that is a problem. But other than that, yeah. So that's the sort of price level we're talking about. Good. I was just
Yeah.
clarifying the
I'm
prices that you mentioned.
Yeah, so I'm back. So Ranger Raptors, yeah, that was somebody from Amazon. You see what digital world intrudes on us all the time. Basically, this car, which was tested in the Middle East validated for heat, all the stuff that they tested worked really well. Like the car does
Yeah.
not overheat and it doesn't have problems with sand and it works on the terrain. The suspension is tuned for our region. It's really incredible product. I have nothing bad to say about the way it drives. There is one wee problem though. Actually, two wee problems as you a Scotsman. Number one, the way people drive in the desert is very different from how they drive in Australia or the UK or even the US. If a dune is like this, most people drive on the side of the dune, and then they slide down or they go up and they go down. People in the Middle East tend to drive on the dune itself, on the ridge of the dune, crushing the dune. And that wouldn't be a problem, but the fuel tank is made of plastic. And what happens is the fuel tank bends inside. So they're replacing fuel tanks on Ranger Raptors because they have like, okay, they kind of have to, because you kind of a big triangle shaped fuel tank. So they should just, it's easy fix, just put a skid plate, but they didn't do that. Problem number two, slightly more problematic. People in the desert out here drive these cars real hard and they smash into the dune and go up, right? Smash into the dune because you got to get the speed to climb these big dunes and the car has the power. It's no problem. You can even increase the height a little bit. There are lots of little tweaks you can do, which people are doing. Because they didn't reckon with how aggressively people drive in the desert out here, the front differential is mounted to the frame. The mounts that hold it to the frame are breaking and cracking. And the problem is the only way to fix that, honestly, it's not the diff itself, it's the frame, is to replace the entire frame. The entire chassis
Wow.
of the Ranger Raptor has to be replaced. They've done about 12 or 15 of them in the region.
Wow.
And it won't stop until they roll out the updated version. So that's stuff that a car that was developed hastily, quickly, you won't find those problems. You need to give it time to also. There's a lot of arrogance that, okay, we've basically come from the US, we've come from Australia, Thailand. We know how our conditions are. We don't know what you do. So car's going to be fine, right? As Shazad and me know, the Middle East has a way of challenging those perceptions. And basically those cars are all breaking. But the Chinese
Yeah.
cars are not being driven that way. So automatically people are giving them benefit of the doubt. But if you drove a Chinese car to the same level, you have the same problems.
Yeah, yeah. But the Chinese are doing, I mean, did I see somewhere online that the Chinese were replicating the desert in laboratory conditions to try and simulate the scenarios? But the
We
reality
heard
is
this
that until,
nonsense back in the day from the
yeah,
Japanese.
but
Remember, we're making the
But
desert
the,
in Japan.
no, but you can't. But the
Can't do it.
reality is, until you're on the ground, you don't know. So going back into my ancient history, I remember. So if some of you remember the Rover ST1, the Rover 3500, the V8s,
Could we?
beautiful looking cars, fantastic looking cars, awesome cars of their day. I was in Saudi Arabia when the Saudi dealer decided to bring those cars in to the Saudi market. And the cars were beautiful. They look great. People love them because they got V8 engines, 3.5 liter cars. They look smooth. They look sleek. They look futuristic. Within a week, they were being found abandoned by the side of the road because the good old British electronics in those cars had never been tested. They had never actually tested that in the conditions of the Middle East. And that was a problem. It's like until you do that, you're going to get it wrong. And over again, some manufacturers that have learned from the fact that you've got to test the car in its actual environment. I remember when the Honda Prelude the first four-wheel steer, the mechanical four-wheel steer, was coming to the Saudi market. And I know lots of young Saudis were so super excited because everybody loves gimmicks. They were super excited about this thing. First batch arrived, sold out straight away, and then the sales bombed. And I was sitting with the Honda guy a few months after that, and I said, "What happened? That car was beautiful. Why isn't it selling?" And he said, "Well, because they all took the car, they all bought the cars. First thing they went down to the Corniche and they raced them, and they raced against Mustangs, which were Fox body Mustangs at the time, and I think the Nissan Laurels, and those cars thrashed the Prelude. They absolutely thrashed it." And I said, "I didn't think the Prelude was that slow." He said, "No, it's not slow, but the engine management system hadn't been calibrated for our fuel."
That
So
was hard.
basically, so basically the engine wasn't producing the power it should have been producing. So it's simple things like that, which so often manufacturers get wrong, even at this stage, even as recent as, and Imthishan will remember that, when Lotus started officially coming back into UAE, and they had to start replacing panels on the Elise. For example, the panels on the windows had to be turned into carbon because the plastic was warping in the heat. Because that's the difference between what actually happens there and what happens in Norwich. So it's
Can I
it's
say,
that
you know
sort of
what the
stuff.
fix for this is, right? The fix for this is you don't do that extreme sort of behavior. I mean, that's fit and finish, but you just don't sell cars in the Middle East then. That's the simple solution. And the
Yeah,
UK is becoming hotter, though. You'll have those problems. The UK is getting
yeah,
hotter. Things
yeah,
that
yeah.
were fine, your 50s ye old MG midget or whatever, will suffer in your increasingly hot country. What are you going to do?
Yeah, yeah, and of course in Bradford you probably have the curry test there. So how do cars cope with? And this is the other thing. It's like there's cultural requirements, right? There's got to be somewhere to put the tissue box, et cetera, et cetera. So so what are the sort of unique? So if you were to design a car for Bradford, Naveed, what would be the sort of key criteria you'd be looking at?
I mean, I don't actually think there's anything specific that you would need extra for Bradford. I mean, clearly we have a variety of cars here that are suited for here. Um, yeah, I don't think there's maybe the weather. Right now, I'm looking out
Yeah.
of the window and it is really heavy rain. I don't know if that's the case where you are, Shazad. Probably, definitely not where you are, Imtishan.
No.
You're probably enjoying the evening sun at the moment. But for here, it's they say it's grim up north. It's miserable. It's always rainy. You know, so you need to account for that. I recently put rain repellent on my car on the windscreen. Does an amazing job in the rain. So yeah, maybe it's just the weather, to be honest. Maybe we've got the
Tell me
opposite
this,
problem.
no, tell me this, Naveed. You told me earlier you were driving a Caterham around in Bradford. What's the
Yes.
reaction you got to that? Because Caterham, there's nowhere for the family, there's nowhere for the cash and carry. I mean, what kind of a stupid dumb car is this? You can only put two people in it. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I had a Caterham last year, and I had one this year as well. The one that I had last year was in this kind of weather. It was miserable. It was raining. It was totally fine. It was quite fun. The one that I had this year was during the heat wave, and oh, it was so hot. Every time I'd get into the car and I'd be stepping out of it, I'd be sweating. But once you're out on the road, it was incredible. The reaction is amazing.
Yeah.
People are coming past horning, thumbs up,
Yeah.
really excited. And it's the younger audience as well. It's the children that are excited by it. Little boys, little girls are excited by the car as well. And it just captures people's imagination. And I think that's what we need to see more of in sort of everyday
So
cars that
so
are suitable for every day, I suppose.
Can I ask
does the
Naveed a
does
question, if you don't mind? Can I
yeah,
jump in and ask Naveed a question?
go on.
Naveed, what's the most memorable car you've driven?
Oh, most memorable car I've driven. Um, I have driven. I mean, of course, we drove McLarens, didn't we, me and Shazad? I've driven Caterhams, but the cars that I enjoy the most are Nissan GTRs. And the
Nice.
one that really stuck with me is the R34 Skyline GTR, which actually I have a little model of, Fast and Furious style one here.
Ah,
But
yeah.
that's
Oh,
that's the most memorable car, and the reason why is because when the R35 came out, it was considerably heavier than a lot of other cars of its time. And if you go one step back to the R34, cars of that era, they were light, they were nimble, there was so much visibility. They felt honest because they're not hiding behind just slap a load of power in the car, and you can make do with it. Cars are getting even heavier now. If you talk about performance cars like the BMW M5, cars back then felt honest. And if I could choose any car to own, it would be that. But the problem is the prices have gone considerably higher
And
now.
we'll only go further up. What's the most
Yeah.
memorable Chinese car you've driven?
The most memorable Chinese car. Oh, that's an interesting question. To be
It
honest,
shouldn't be that hard, but it
I've
is.
not driven a lot of the older Chinese cars. It's more the newer stuff. It's the electric cars, and the most memorable one actually. I don't know if Shazad, you might have driven it. It's the Skywell BE11. Have you driven that? Oh,
No.
Sounds
it
like a
was an
fax machine, but go on.
it was an
Yeah.
interesting car that because it just felt like the refinement wasn't there. It just didn't feel finished. I think the infotainment system was a bit of a prototype at the moment as well. But it just regardless of the weather conditions, every time you put your foot on the accelerator and you turn slightly, you can spin the wheels on command. It was really unnerving at times. So yeah, for the opposite reason, that's probably the most memorable car I've
So
driven.
that's kind of my point, right? You talked briefly about a GTR, and you immediately launched into a sort of immediate deep fact about it, and then I'd want to own it. And with the
Yeah.
Chinese car, you went immediately, hey, it was flawed, and that was the most memorable thing about it. So what I'm putting to the panel as a question is, why do we feel compelled as experts, influencers, journalists, whatever you want to call yourself? Why do we feel compelled to carry the water of the Chinese car industry? Why do we
Yeah.
feel compelled to say, oh, okay, I wouldn't buy this car for myself, but you, my mate, my uncle, my auntie, my friend, stranger in the road at Tesco's, whatever. Why do I feel compelled to say, but you should buy a Chinese car because it's all right for you? Why are we not buying the same thing? Because we don't. Obviously, we don't necessarily agree. There isn't the car that we've individually encountered that we would buy yet. Why do we do that? I'm just putting
Well,
the thought
look,
out there.
yeah, well, it's very simple. We three are enthusiasts, and there's a difference. So when you look at you look at 90% of car buyers today, they don't really care about the history, the heritage, how it drives, what color it is. They're just like, will it get me to work? Can I put my stuff in it? Can I sync my phone up to it? Okay, it's good to go. That's it. That's all they really care about. So for the vast majority of people, as a consumer journalist, when you look at that scenario and you look at individual people, you go, okay, what's your requirements? Okay, well, this car is fine for you. And they go, yeah. And actually, 5 months later, they're like, Shazad, that was okay. That car is working out perfectly.
But
But when you're
how
talking
will
to an
they dream?
enthusiast,
You know what I mean? How will
yeah,
they
but when you're
dream?
talking to an enthusiast, well, this is it. So a 10-year-old Shazad today, maybe in a school in Bradford, would have gone crazy seeing Naveed4Speed going past in this little Caterham or in a Nissan Skyline from Fast and Furious and gone, oh, one day I'm gonna have one of those. And you've set up an enthusiast for life. But when Naveed4Speed went down the road in a Build Your Dreams Dolphin Surf, he thought, and
That's
that
what I
was it.
mean.
There
It's
was
like I would
there
have
was no inspiration there. So, and I think
100%.
that's what we're losing. And the question actually then boils down to that ratio of the consumer versus the enthusiast, which we are. Is that actually going to swing more towards the consumer because we're going to be ending up with less and less
I want to ask
enthusiasts?
Naveed what he thinks because I disagree with you, Shazad. In the rare case, I don't think there is that hard line between consumer who buys white goods again from Mr. Sam and Mrs. Sung. I think there are people and they're enthusiasts who only drive 911s, who only drive GTRs. I think everybody is an enthusiast. I think everybody is passionate about something. Maybe they're not passionate about cars, but they're not exposed to it because we are censoring our real opinions about these cars. So most of these Chinese cars to me are like, they're all right, they're fine. Should you buy one? No, not really. You buy any land like a Discovery or a Defender or even like a Discovery Sport, even a basic Land Rover, you still have a sense of the brand. You have a sense of something with a bit more class. I have friends who bought pretty boring Toyotas, and I really don't like Toyota as a brand. But after a couple of years, they come to me and like, God, I wish I could buy a Porsche or a Mustang. And I'm like, but you're a sensible person. Why do you want a Porsche or a Mustang? He's like, no, but I just want one. I can't explain it. I'm like, yeah, that's good. It's passion. So when you drove around, Naveed, in your Caterham, you, as exactly like Shazad said, you have no idea how many people on two levels that you get. Number one is, look, he's a nutter driving a Caterham around Bradford, and any stray bicycle could end his life at any given moment because he just topples over. And number two, it's a brown fella in a Caterham. And I'm like, that is important to see that. Like, okay, that visibility I maintain is very important. So what do you think?
I think going back to your point about the Chinese brands, I think ultimately it goes back to what we've spoken about before, which is we have to serve the audience, right? And especially with this new digital landscape, especially with social media influencing the way that media is conveyed, if you do not serve the audience, then you will get dropped, you will get ignored, you will maybe as if you have an opposing opinion, then people might just watch anyway or might consume your media. But generally you need to cater to the media. And I found recently there was a Chinese a new Chinese car, and a content creator was at an event editing a video for it because they wanted to get it out as soon as possible. And it wasn't because the car was good. I mean, I didn't even drive the car. I don't even know if the car was good or not. It was because they wanted to be the first out there, and they thought that the audience will think, what's this new car? I want to go see it. I want to, and that would get them the views and the clicks and stuff like this. So I think ultimately it's catering to the audience. And if the cars are priced correctly and the audience is interested, then of course that's what they are going to search for, and that's what they're looking for. And as journalists, we've got to somewhat, cater to that.
It's the Honda
I think it's
CR-V launch that we used to avoid going to in the old days. And it was a dull car. I've got a CR-V. I think my dad's got one still. It's a great car. But you know what? That car, Shazad, remember that car, the burgundy CR-V that we shot so many videos out of? Still
yeah,
kicking. It's
yeah.
odd. It's 12 years old. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with
Yeah,
it.
well, don't forget, we had a family CRV in Dubai for pretty much the whole time we were there. So those were solid, dependable, reliable cars, which had a kind of personality of their own. And I think this is the thing: anything with a internal combustion engine, at some point, seems to develop some sort of a personality. And I take your point about the fact that there is interest in exciting cars. I don't know whether that's at an enthusiast level or whether that's at a FOMO level. Fear of missing out. It's like, oh, I want to have a sports car, or I want to have one of those. Why don't I get one of those? But I think that where that lives and where that exists is a good thing. But I do fear that connection that we have, that the three of us clearly have, when you talk about, there is no more car that you can be connected with than you can with a Caterham. It's literally, the only, this side of riding a bicycle or riding a motorbike, that's the only thing that you can experience that on. But I do fear that as we're moving towards an era where even the manual gearbox is disappearing, we're going to lose more of that emotional connection with these things, and that puts me in mind of worrying about the future generation of enthusiasts. We need more Naveed4Speeds driving Caterhams around school car parks and
Yeah, it's a
school
social
playgrounds and stuff like
service.
that.
I hope that I might inspire somebody. There are people who see my work and they are interested. People slightly younger than me from Bradford, or maybe not even from Bradford, and they are genuinely interested in how they can pursue this kind of stuff. So I feel like I mean, it gives me a sense of pride, and I hope it's the same with you guys. I did have one question actually for Imthishan, and it was in relating to the 911, because it's a bit of a trope that you become a journalist, you buy yourself something like a Mazda MX-5, and eventually you get to a point where there's some sort of 911 in the garage. And I appreciate the 911, and I can see myself one day hopefully being at a point where that is the case. But why is it that us enthusiasts or car journalists are drawn to the 911, do you think?
Go on, Shazad. I feel this is all you, but I have
No, he
thoughts.
asked you. He asked you. You have to tackle this.
I
You're
heard it
asking
is
the
because
wrong
of the
one,
yellow
mate, because
911.
I don't like 911s. I think they're cars driven by pricks. I don't like the people who. I don't like anything about them. I don't. I couldn't look. My father had an original 19. My car passion comes from my dad, who's not really passionate about cars anymore, but he's passionate about fixing old cars. And he had an old Beetle in the 19. a 1960s Beetle, original right-hand drive German Beetle in Sri Lanka, which we had. It was a terrible car. It was always broken. It was like rusty. The engine was changed, but it was a beautiful thing. It had a smell that you would never forget. And that's what made me the person I am today, was that car.
Was it a
Because
good
we were
smell
driving
or a
around
bad
in
smell?
Nissan Sunnies and Corollas to get to it. But the 911 was never on my with Porsche the way that many journalists are. So I couldn't tell you as an automotive journalist in Dubai, because I didn't grow up with it on my bedroom wall. But a lot of people did. I tell you, I was into Ferraris. I was into Magnum PI TV cars,
Yeah.
and the Porsche 911 was never a TV car for a lot of people. I like cars like Trans Ams because of Knight Rider. All that stuff was cool because the people driving them were cool. They were something a skinny brown kid could never be, David Hasselhoff could never be, the kind of person. But 911 was driven by pricks, still is to a large extent. And all of the stuff that a 911 denotes as a brand, as a car, is exactly what turns me off about the highbrow end of car journalism. Everybody who drives one assumes they're an amazing driver. They assume that they're a historian of the brand. They're a freaking caretaker of the brand. So when they meet you, they've got to assault you with their 911 information. I got 964. I got 964. But those 993 people, we don't like them. And you're just like, I don't care. Like, your car looks cool, mate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it would be cooler if I had a GT3. I'm like, I didn't ask you. So they're just really annoying, tiresome people. And everything about their brand puts me off. But it's exactly what draws journalists to them, because there is a lot of journalists who want to be superior, for better, for lack of word. They look down on Chinese cars, just like the way I do. And all of them basically want to be the people who gatekeep and say, oh, but mate, you haven't lived till you've driven an I-11. And annoyingly, now I kind of agree with them, having driven some 911s lately. I kind of get it. But Shazad, to answer your point, I think button this discussion on that on the 911. You weren't there, but there 2 years previously, we had that 911, which I love, and we had Jag E-Type. It was very, very temperamental. It was fouling its plug. It was a Jag. It wasn't leaking,
Yeah.
but it was having other problems. It cooked its alternator, or a dynamo, sorry, by day 3. And Scott was driving it. You remember our friend Scott from Motor Trend. And I drove both those cars back to back in the night because I had to fuel them up like we were. And I kept thinking, those are the two best cars in the world. With due respect to
Yeah.
your GTR, my friend, which is an
Yeah.
amazing car. But to drive that 911 in the dark, it was amazing. But the Jag, which was slower, didn't have a roof, it wasn't as comfortable, and it was in every way better. The British Jaguar E-Type. And if you ask me why, I'll tell you, because you didn't care about the world. When you drove that car, you just felt good. The car made you
And
feel good in a way that when you went through every roundabout, you're like, I feel like every playboy. I feel amazing. And if nobody's in the car next to me, it's okay. The thing about
And I,
911
and I think
is
that that is the most important thing, isn't it? Is how the cars make you feel ultimately. We
911s
have,
are good.
gentlemen, we have absolutely and totally well run over the clock.
Oh, wow.
So there was another question that came in, but we'll have to pick that up another time, because it was Hooked was asking what you think of running classic cars, but that's going to get into a
Oh,
deeper
come on.
conversation.
Surely we can take five
But
minutes and answer it.
well, but, you know what? Go on then, I know, I've had a B30. I know that you had a DeLorean. So yeah, what do you think about running classic cars
Um,
in 30 seconds or less?
in 30 seconds or less, bring deep pockets. Basically, add 50% of your budget of buying the car
Yeah,
to actually running the car. And that's regardless of whether I had a low mileage
yeah.
example. I had a 6,000 mile DeLorean, it still cost me quite a bit. I had a very old Toyota, it cost me 7 times the price of the car to run it. So classic cars are not cheap things, but you must do it. If you're passionate about it, like that Porsche, or you always dreamed about it, your life is not complete unless you do it, and no car will suffice.
Naveed?
Personally, I've never owned classic cars, not driven a
Would
lot
you
of classic
consider
cars.
one?
But yes, of course, yeah. Like I mentioned, they feel honest, they feel
Yeah.
more pure, they feel more true. But I think from what I feel, it would have to be the maintenance, the car care. I do a lot of product testing, and I can see I've incorporated a lot of those into my own car, which is not that old, but into a classic car, definitely more important.
So I'm going to bring this to a wrap now. Before we do, just to take this full circle, because we came into this conversation talking to Naveed about imposter syndrome. And, and I think that that's one thing that you, Naveed in particular, should put very far from your mind.
I will never
Because
get past it. I will get past it.
you
Sitting here
will, you
talking to
will,
you guys
you
as
will.
well, especially.
You will get past it. Don't worry. It might take a few years, but you will get past it. But the reality is that we need more people, not less. People like yourself coming through, talking about cars, firing up the enthusiasm, creating the inspiration, creating the content that gets people excited about cars. This is important. It's more important than it's ever been. And we need to see more diversity of this content as well. So thank you so much, Naveed, for taking the time to join us today. It's been absolutely fantastic to speak to you. And Imthishan, old buddy, as usual, always a laugh.
Always a pleasure. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Naveed.
Thank you very
Great
much,
stuff.
guys. Nice to meet you too, Imthishan.
So thanks very much to everybody who joined us. I know there were quite a lot of people watching. This was the live transmission. Just to let you know, this will stay live on the channel, but I will put up a higher quality version of this by later today or tomorrow, so you can check that out as well. So keep up with the content and be sure to join us for the next Brown Car Guy therapy session again very, very soon. Thanks very much for joining us. Take care. Okay, so I've